My wife, Rachel, had always been relentless in business. She built her career on sharp decisions, cutting losses, and making tough calls with surgical precision. I once admired that about her. But when that same cold efficiency was directed at me, admiration quickly morphed into something else. I sat across from her in her office, the glass walls behind her showcasing the towering skyline, a testament to her ambition. Everything about her exuded control. The crisp white blazer, the way she reclined in her leather chair, the perfectly manicured nails tapping softly against the desk. She tilted her head slightly, observing me, savoring the confidence of someone who believed they were untouchable. Then, with a slow, deliberate grin, she delivered the words that shattered everything. "You'll be training my lover to replace you, Tyler." She studied my reaction, expecting anger, betrayal. But when I remained silent, she pressed on, her voice smooth and calculated. "We're letting you go. Professionally, of course, after 12 years. As if this wasn't personal. As if some distant boardroom had come to this decision, and she was merely the messenger. I nodded, not in agreement, but because questioning her would have been pointless. Arguing would have only fueled her sense of power. Instead, a small, knowing smile played on my lips. And for just a flicker of a moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. She had anticipated fury, desperation, something she could leverage. But instead, she met something unexpected. Acceptance. People like Rachel mistake composure for weakness. What she didn't know was that I had already moved on 3 months ago. Still, I kept my tone steady, folded my hands in my lap. "Before I leave, I'll make sure he's well trained." She smirked, leaning back and crossing her legs, relishing the moment. "I knew you'd handle this professionally. Too many people let their emotions get the best of them when they're let go." Rich, coming from someone who made every decision based on emotions, she just covered them with ice. That was the difference between us. I never let feelings cloud my judgment, but that hadn't always been the case. This company was never solely Rachel's. It had originally belonged to her father, Charles Davidson. He built it from the ground up and, over the years, trusted me, treating me like a son. When I married Rachel, I believed we were building something together. But when Charles fell ill, everything shifted. Rachel made it clear she had no intention of sharing control. At first, the signs were subtle. Meetings where my input was disregarded, decisions made without involving me. She couldn't fire me outright. I had too much credibility, too much respect from the people who truly ran this company. So she gradually sidelined me, reducing my role bit by bit, until she finally found the nerve to push me out completely. And then there was her new lover. He probably thought he had won something, convinced that Rachel choosing him over me meant more than it did. I could picture him now, texting his friends, bragging about how easy it was to take my position. Poor fool. I stood up slowly, adjusted my cuffs, already anticipating the HR paperwork that would likely arrive by the end of the day. The scent of her familiar, expensive perfume lingered between us. She was relishing this moment. For Rachel, victory wasn't complete until she could look me in the eye and savor it. She needed to see me break, to witness the exact second she knew she had beaten me. I met her gaze, holding it for a moment before offering the faintest of smiles. "I suppose tomorrow will be interesting," I said. Her grin remained unwavering. "I'm sure you'll land on your feet." "Oh, I would. In fact, tomorrow I wouldn't be walking into that boardroom as a former employee. I would be walking in as the new owner." I turned and stepped out into the hallway, without another word. As soon as I did, my phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer, James. "Paperwork is filed. Board meeting set for 9 a.m. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, exhaling slowly. Rachel had made her move. Tomorrow it was my turn. Rachel sat rigidly, her shoulders tense as she struggled to make sense of what was happening. I tried to piece together a puzzle that had already been assembled. I pulled out a chair across from her, settling in as James cleared his throat. "As of this morning, Davidson Enterprises' ownership structure has undergone significant changes," he announced. "A meeting has been scheduled to address these developments." Rachel scowled, her eyes scanning the documents in front of her. I clasped my hands together, deliberately taking my time before speaking. As you'll notice, there has been silence in recent months. Investments have shifted. Shares have changed hands. Acquisitions have taken place quietly. And as of this morning, I saw the realization dawn on her. Her gaze sharpened as she started connecting the dots. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice edged with suspicion. I smiled. "I'm referring to MKT Holdings." Her entire posture stiffened. James placed a stack of documents on the table, and the board members leaned in, their eyes scanning the pages. Murmurs spread to the room, growing louder with each revelation. Rachel's expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief, then to pure, unfiltered rage. She grabbed a file, flipping through it frantically. "This is a joke," she muttered. James adjusted his glasses. "It's not." He turned a page, continuing. 3 months ago, MKT Holdings secured a controlling interest in Davidson Enterprises. As of this morning, the acquisition has been finalized. Rachel's breathing quickened. She turned to me, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "MKT," she whispered. Leaning back in my chair, I watched as it sank in. Her lips parted slightly as the full weight of the revelation hit her. "No," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes." Silence filled the room. The board members exchanged glances, some barely hiding their satisfaction. They had watched Rachel drive this company into ground, powerless to intervene. Now, they watched her finally face the consequences. "This isn't legal. You don't have the resources for this. You couldn't afford it." James calmly opened another document. "Actually," he said smoothly, "every transaction was conducted legally and transparently. The SEC has already been notified." Rachel's hands clenched into fists. "You conniving little—" I tilted my head slightly. "Careful, Rachel." She turned toward the board, desperation flickering in her eyes. "You can't let this happen." A long silence followed before Janet Shunn, one of the senior board members, finally spoke. "No, Rachel." Rachel's face paled. "This was your father's company, and for the past 3 years, you've systematically run it into ground." The other board members nodded in agreement. Janet continued, "I move to vote on new leadership." "I second that," another member added. "Motion carried," said another. Rachel's gaze darted around the room, searching for support. There was none. She had alienated everyone who could have helped her, burned every bridge. Now she stood alone. "The vote is simple," I stated. "All in favor of removing Rachel Davidson as CEO, raise your hand." One by one, hands went up. Rachel sat motionless, shaking her head as her entire empire crumbled around her. "You can't do this." I met her eyes. "It's already done." Security entered the room. Rachel's breath hitched, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Tyler, don't do this," she pleaded. I held her gaze. "You did this." Her expression hardened. "I built this company, and you're just trying to take credit for it." James interjected, his voice firm. "Mrs. Davidson, you need to leave the premises." Rachel turned to security. One of the guards hesitated, but after a brief pause, he gave a small nod. "Please come with us, ma'am." Rachel pushed back her chair angrily and shot me a look filled with contempt. "I'll fight this. I'll sue you. This isn't over." I remained calm. "You can do whatever you want, Rachel, but you'll do it from outside this company." She opened her mouth as if to argue, but stopped. She had already lost. Eric stood outside the boardroom, his face pale, lips slightly parted. Rachel barely acknowledged him, her expression distant, almost as if she had just realized she had backed the wrong person. I stepped past him, letting the moment sink in. Then, exhaling softly, I straightened. "Shall we discuss the future of Davidson Enterprises?" And just like that, the company was mine.